And thank you for joining us. Our special guest today is John Gill from the Miami Recovery Project.
Right.
So first of all, tell us about the project, what you do, how you get funded, and who you're helping.
Okay, sure. I'm the executive director at Miami Recovery Project. We help people who are struggling with substance misuse or mental health challenges or homelessness. So those are the populations we serve. And our funding, we get two buckets of funding, one from Thriving Mind, which is really DCF in Florida, and then the Homeless Trust of Miami-Dade County for our street outreach services and our homeless services.
So lots of people, when they hear this type of thing, so who takes care of the people that are out on the street, the homeless people that are out on the side of the roads? Mm-hmm. Maybe they're asking for money or asking for food. So tell us about that and how your organization helps these people.
We do street outreach, which is a specific type of program that the Homeless Trust funds us to do, which is every day we go out and just cruise, really, to places where there have been reports of people who are unhoused, or there are known encampments available, or likely places where people tend to congregate, which is often transit stops or shopping plazas. And we have territories that were assigned within Miami-Dade to go and kind of.
So you have a geographic area. These are the places you go, and
right.
your job, you're getting paid to implement the bigger picture of the county.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting thing in that when we go out and we meet with people, most of the time they're reluctant to accept services, and it's totally within their right to decline. They can say, "No, I'm fine." And I don't need assistance right now. So we will just keep going back to try and build trust with those people, some level of rapport where they're willing to talk to us, and we can, maybe offer assistance that they weren't initially willing to take. A lot of times they see us, as anybody who approaches them, as authority figures. And many times they've been burned by that in the past.
So what in essence is, if they're on the street corner and you go there and they say, "Yes, I need help," what happens right then?
We would immediately that day try to get them into a shelter, an emergency shelter where they could, stay, get a bed, get meals, 3 meals a day, take a shower. Unfortunately, shelter beds are very hard to come by. So on any given night, there might be 3 or 4 beds available in the whole county. So they go fast.
That's out of how many beds, more or less?
Well, there's probably a couple thousand beds. Most of them are occupied, though. And so the ones that become available are very small in number.
So how do we as a community help those people?
Well, one thing is to advocate for just more shelter beds,
mm-hmm.
And one of the big problems is that many communities, are reluctant to have a shelter in their borders.
Cutler Bay is a good example.
Yeah, they went through a long process of getting a hotel converted to it's not really even a shelter anymore. It's like housing for elderly people because it's only for seniors. But that was like a 2-year
process. So Bill
process.
Myers, I want to know, when do the people become seniors? What's the age?
For that location, 55.
Okay. So Miller, we're okay. Sort of.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, one day you'll be able to go. So, but that is the biggest problem is, the kind of not in my backyard approach to that.
Sometimes you'll see somebody out on the road actually sleeping on a sidewalk. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have seen that, and it's so heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking, and most people do instinctively think, "What can I do?" And what we do is, we go and talk to them. We'll bring them a hygiene kit, which is just a bag of essentials that they might need. We'll bring them food or water. But if they say, "No, I'm fine here," that's the end of it for that day.
So often, we hear that the cities and the counties trying to move these folks around by changing some laws or loosening them up. I'm not quite sure what the most recent thing is, but if somebody's out on the street and they're standing at a street corner. And they're just like you or me, or they're just like they haven't taken a bath in 2 weeks. The law protects them.
It does. They still have their rights.
Yes.
So they can't be coerced into doing anything. There are new laws that went into effect last year that do make it more difficult in some cases for people outside on the street to stay on the street, which is an anti-camping law, they call it, which if somebody makes an official complaint to a jurisdiction, whether it's the county or municipality, and it is lodged as a formal complaint, which means you go in and talk to a commissioner or somebody, then a 5-day clock starts ticking. And we as an outreach team, like here, there's been this official complaint. We go to the location specified, we talk to the people, and we let them know because it's an official complaint, we have to put up a 5-day notice that you must vacate within 5 days.
That's if they're staying at a specific location.
Yeah.
But if they move from block to block, what happens?
Then they buy another 5 days.
Okay.
And I think a lot of these folks are pretty mobile. I mean, there's really like two extremes.
I'm glad you brought that up because so often we see them with their shopping carts filled with stuff. There's something important to them. They have their stuff. That's like their Winnebago.
Right.
That's it. That's their thing.
Yeah, and
right?
that's something that we've come to kind of understand is that when we talk to them, they don't consider themselves homeless. They'll just say, "Oh no, this is my home." They've kind of got everything they need with them, and wherever they take it, that's their home. And so it's a different way of thinking that, those of us who are lucky enough to have a roof over our head don't experience.
So let's talk a little bit about the percentage of people that are out on the street. They could be qualified or diagnosed as having a mental illness or alcohol abuse or drugs and whatever else might be going on.
Right.
What are the percentages? So if we look at somebody out on the street, here are the percentages they're going to have this problem or this problem or this problem.
I couldn't give you concrete numbers, but I'll say many, many.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. And most of, we do the street outreach for the Homeless Trust. We also provide peer services for Thriving Mind, which is directed strictly to people, recovering from substance abuse or mental health challenges. But we find there's so much co-occurrence between folks who are homeless and those who have those issues in their lives. And so a lot of our peer services end up also serving the folks on the street.
Years ago, I wrote a story about me being at a stoplight and somebody coming over to me. And when I was writing it, I was saying, here he's coming towards me. What am I going to do? Am I going to look the other way? Am I going to look down? Am I going to give him some money? Am I going to just reach in my pocket and give whatever it is? Am I going to give coins? But if I give coins, I'm probably going to have to touch him. If I give a bill, I can go like that. What do you want to do? And I'm having this whole internal conversation at the stoplight.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure what the answer was, but what I knew is when the light turned green, I said, I'm on to my next lesson. And so often people wonder, what should they do? And when I was at a stoplight, 103rd Street in the Palmetto Expressway, turning left, there's a big ramp like this, and there was a 5-year-old boy laying up against the wall in the grass, and a man and a woman. I suppose they were a couple.
Right.
And so I gave them a bunch of money. Somebody says, "Well, they were just taking your money." I said, "What I know, there's a 5-year-old laying on the ground 5 feet from my left tire." So people, again, want to know, Michael, what do you suggest? I said, I'm not suggesting anything because it's really what you want to do.
Right.
But if somebody even suggests, well, you should give them some food, you should give them a card to Camilla's house, you should give them a card. I think part of the question is when you're out on the road a lot, like Miller Myers is, what do we do? You're in the loop over here, and you see somebody, and you want to help. What is it that emotionally we want to do, and what's a better thing to do?
Well, I mean, I feel the same tug, and my instinct is to give money, or some, if I have water in the car or something, I'll do that. And I wouldn't discourage anyone from doing that because, these folks can use the help. One of the things you could also do is let us know, or any of the street outreach teams, that this person is there and here's the specific location, because we can then go out and talk to them that day and see if we can offer help in a way that, can make everyone feel like something got done, or drew attention to this.
So if you go out there and the guy says, I'm ready for help, does he get in the car or truck and then you take him? Or how's that work?
Well, sometimes. I mean, if we're going to do an intake, and anybody who's going to get into the system, we have to do an intake, which takes a little bit of time, not long, but we could take them in the car, but only if there's a place to go. and that is to a shelter. And until we get a confirmation that there's a bed available, it's complicated.
Okay, it is. So let's talk about somebody that they're living in some dwelling and they're not homeless, but they've had a drug problem, or maybe they currently have a drug problem. What help can you offer them?
Well, if they have a drug problem and they're willing to seek treatment, we can help them get into either a detox or a rehab or, a treatment center that they can stay at for, 30 days, 60 days, whatever is the treatment, that they need. And that would be the first step. If they're unwilling to go to treatment, then it becomes harder. If they're actively using, then they're also not going to be welcome in a shelter. So it limits the options. But if they're willing to go into treatment, we have things we can offer them.
So, as you know, the county opened finally the mental health hospital, if you will.
Right.
Is that going to relieve some problem or just move them from where they were in the prisons to there?
It can only help, because it's another, I don't know what it is, like 80 beds that are going to be available. And for people with like distinct needs. And I think part of the service that will offer is that people who would otherwise be in the justice system are going to have a place to go. And that's a positive. So it's going to be a big help. The thing we hope is that more beds will become available, because that's for a population that needs kind of very hands-on care.
What are the popular drugs right now?
Oh, well, fentanyl is still very popular. There's like an even stronger version of it called carfentanil that is on the streets. Heroin is popular. I mean, meth is popular. It is a strange thing that a lot of the drugs that, we hear about and that I hear about are ones that have been around for a while. I wouldn't say there's anything sweeping, the city that is new. They're all dangerous, in the sense that oftentimes if you buy drugs on the street, you don't know what's in them, and you're taking a risk every time you use them. And I'm not one to lecture or judge because I've been there myself. One of the things we offer at Miami Recovery Project is that all of us who work there have lived experience. So we know when we go up to someone who's homeless, we can say, I've been there, I've been in your shoes. Or somebody in recovery, I've been in your shoes.
Can they feel that from you? Do they know that?
I think some can, and one of the, sort of hallmarks of peer support is that it is successful because people actually are willing to listen. When we can say, I can't tell you what you should do, but I can tell you what I did and what worked for me. And that tends to carry more weight than, if you're with a clinician or somebody who's sort of just outlining, these are the bad things that are going to happen if you continue on the same road that you're on.
So we know lots of folks have overdosed over the years. And tell us about the antidote that the project carries.
Well, we have Narcan, which is naloxone is the generic name for it, and we can give it out to anybody if they need it. So if you want Narcan, come to our office. We can give it out freely. We also offer training on how to use it, and it is something that is like a miracle for folks who are overdosing.
But how would a novice who's somebody says, here, in case you know somebody that overdose, so they see some guy out on the street, whatever's happening, how do people know they want to administer Narcan to somebody? How do they know that it's actually a drug like that?
The good thing and the best thing about Narcan is it can't harm anyone. So even if you give it to somebody who is not actually truly overdosing, it's not going to hurt them. It can only help them. So if you're in doubt about, is this a real overdose? I don't know what they took. Administer the Narcan anyway, because you can't hurt somebody with it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And how this is by injection or
it's a nasal spray? Yeah.
Just spray
so it's just like as if you're using something because you had a cold, and it's very easy to administer. The one thing that we tell people is administer the drug and then kind of stand clear a little bit, because sometimes people's reaction will be so immediate.
Yeah, how fast is that? If it works, because it does work
within minutes, and it's it is life saving. Because it can really arrest the overdose immediately. Now, the one thing that, sometimes people who have been overdosing, are just not expecting they're suddenly going to be drawn out of it. And so it's a shock to them, So you have to just be careful that you're not physically like holding them or something, because their body's going to have a reaction. But, administering it never going to hurt anybody.
So it's not just an antidote, it's an antidote, but there's something else that occurs to the body. Explain that.
I'm, not a doctor, so I don't know the mechanics of how it works. I know that it does work, and it's very quick. It gets right in your bloodstream and somehow counteracts the effects of the drugs. The effects that were actually.
Have you had the opportunity to give somebody Narcan?
I never have. I hope that, I can. I also hope I can't, because it would mean somebody's in terrible distress.
Yes.
Let's
talk about people that abuse alcohol. Mm-hmm. Are there folks that do alcohol and drugs and a bunch of other stuff, or do they have a drug of choice?
Most people have a drug of choice, but many people do a lot of different things. I mean, I am an recovering alcoholic, but I also took a lot of drugs. And part of it was because when I was drinking, my judgment was cloudy and everything else seemed, well, why not? So I think a lot of people do a lot of different things. But my own experience is I did have a drug of choice, and that was alcohol.
So how prevalent is alcoholism?
Hard to say. It's pretty widespread. I mean, I've read statistics that, probably 10% of the adult population has some level of a drinking problem.
So why is it we sort of laugh, oh, so-and-so was so drunk the other day, they were acting stupid, and we sort of poo-poo it?
I think part of it is that because alcohol is legal, there isn't the stigma attached to it that there might be to drugs. Drugs are bad because they're illegal, but alcohol, everyone, and most people who drink alcohol can drink it, very responsibly and have one or two and stop. It's only those of us who, can't stop that it's a problem for. So I think a lot of people don't really see that it's like the problem that it could be, because it's not a problem for them.
We saw the changeover when people would be smoking pot. You go, I said, you're jeopardizing all this stuff from happening. And then the pothead thing was sort of on top of that. Rather than, if you get caught, you're going to have this problem, and you're going to have to pay a lot of money. It's going to be on your record. And we saw when it became legal, all of a sudden that whole aspect of it disappeared.
Right.
And I think that the concept of it's just the pothead sort of also sort of mitigated. It sort of seemed to have gone away.
Right. Well, and I think partly it's because it is more socially acceptable, and probably the audience of people who tried pot now is larger, and many people might find it just something that they do occasionally, like drinking,
Years ago on 60 Minutes, whatever, they were out in Colorado and say, okay, they went to some party, they were filming. So you had drinks and beers and food and pot. So you just picked what you wanted, right? And it was like, and this is before the marijuana really became legal on our coast over here. And we saw how people just got much more accustomed to it. So if alcohol, homelessness, drug abuse. What about overeaters? Not that Miller Myers and I could relate to that, but he's over there chagrining, not me. So tell us about that, if you can.
Well, I mean, it's not a population that we, focus on or really serve, but it's the same dynamics at work. People have different addictions, and many people have a food addiction. And it can be treated the same way as an alcohol or drug addiction, which is my experience. What worked for me was going to 12-step programs, like AA or NA, and there's Overeaters Anonymous. But a lot of it is changing your thinking.
There's a 12-step program, I think that's appropriate to call it that, I think, that's not too far from here. And last night I left at 8 o'clock. Yes, Susan, I was at the office last night at 8. There were at least 75 cars out front. And I don't know, that could be 1.5 people per car. All right. There were 100 and some odd people there last night. I don't know if it was a medallion night or whatever it was, and I'm rarely here at night. And so when I saw that many cars, I realized how many people are impacted by the alcohol or drugs or homelessness. It's huge.
Right. It is an enormous number. I mean, particularly alcoholism or drug addiction. because there's so many people who are trying to, get their lives back on track. There are meetings, hundreds of meetings every day in Miami-Dade County, and people who are not, struggling with those challenges aren't aware of them because they don't need to be, but if they walk down the street, they might find a meeting, and every night you could go to 100 different meetings.
It is extraordinary. So for somebody that is homeless, that doesn't have any money, there's help for them here in Miami-Dade County, isn't there?
There are different programs available, certainly so that if you don't have money for food, there are ways to get food and to get fed and meals available. There are even programs, and we work with the Homeless Trust on these for people who don't have income to still get housing, and a lot of it depends on like your age, whether you're disabled, your life circumstances. But I wouldn't say to anybody, there's no hope. For everybody, there's hope, and there is some program probably available that's going to help you meet your needs.
A couple of Christmases ago, my brother went with a videographer to downtown under the bridge. I'll just call it that.
Right.
He came back. He was in shock. He was just like, he was blown away about how many people were just sleeping there. Mm-hmm. And they had a place to go right there. That was where they were going.
Right.
So one of the things that we see for these folks that are in a building where they sleep, what happens during the day? They go out during the day and they go to...
do a lot. Well, and this is something, probably a lot of people didn't realize, a lot of the folks in shelters leave during the day because they have jobs. Many of the people who live on the street do have income. They have jobs, so they just don't make enough money. The rents in Miami have, over the last few years, just gone through the roof. And a lot of people who are homeless today are not the typical population, some of us might have in our head, somebody who is just down and out or whatever. A lot of these folks have jobs, they have families. A lot of the homeless now live in their cars because they can't afford their rent.
I hear this term frequently, unsheltered. Mm-hmm. And at some places, some of the students at some of the colleges, where they call them couch, whatever it happens to be, and I realize they are actually unsheltered. They're just they want to go to school.
Right.
And so tonight, for the next week, I'm staying over here, and they move around. So this is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon, especially in Miami with our rising costs.
Right.
If anything, it's going to continue on.
Yeah, it's going to be a bigger and bigger issue, and there are solutions, but they require a lot of effort, like more housing is going to be key, and it has to be housing that people can afford.
And explain to me how you wound up getting into this field.
It was an accident, really. Before I was an employee at Miami Recovery Project, I was a client there because I was newly in recovery and trying to get better, myself.
So that's relatively recent.
It was, I've been there a couple of years. And I only moved to Miami 5 years ago. My whole life had been up in Washington, D.C. And I moved...
Where the smartest people in the world live.
I used to think that when I lived there, I don't think everyone agrees all the time. But I came to Miami because I needed to get sober. And, I did what everyone tends to recommend against, just uprooting yourself and going to a new place. But I did it, and, I had lost my job, I had lost my marriage, lost my house. I really needed to start over, I thought. And I came here, there's a lot of treatment centers in Florida. It's actually quite an industry here. And so 2 days after I got here, I went into the treatment center, and that started a path of like the next 2 years, 7 different treatment centers. And I only finally got sober when I had a peer specialist at the Miami Recovery Project.
7 different treatment centers. Were you getting thrown out, or you say, this isn't for me, and you find another one?
Oh, no, I stayed the full course, and, graduated, so to speak. But each time I left, I didn't have a plan for what I was going to do, because the treatment centers are great for separating you from the drugs or alcohol. But unless you know what you're going to do the day you get out, I went back to old behaviors.
So when I was in school, I used to smoke, a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I said, I went on vacation. See, I went on vacation back then, all right? And I said, that's it, I'm done. where did I go? I went right back into the environment, and there was everybody. It was just 2 weeks later, and I was done, but they weren't done.
Right.
And for me to struggle, to get away from that, I would go, I got a cold, I don't want to smoke the pot,
Right.
and then finally they go, so you stop. It took weeks because I didn't have the guts to say, I can't associate with these people anymore. So that's a tough thing to do, to be able to separate yourself from like-minded people.
It is. One of the things they tell you in treatment, and certainly in 12-step programs, is the only thing you have to change is everything, and it's true. And that's a huge undertaking, It means a lot of the people who were in your life before can't be in your life moving forward if you want to really get solid foundation in recovery.
There was somebody that used to live in the neighborhood. One day he just stopped showing up, and he'd been working here part-time for about, 10 years. And I go to his house, not too far from here. And I knew he was there. The house was a mess. And I'm walking on the door, and I hear him screaming out the when he comes out without his shirt on. He had lost about 30 pounds, and he only weighed 130 before. His head looked like this, all bony. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, somebody that I know wound up getting him into a local hospital. I think he darted out the first day or two because he realized what happened. Right. Then he goes into a longer-term place off of 36th Street, and they said, if you don't come back, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to jail, whatever it was. And so he would leave during the day and go back at night. Finally, he stopped, and now he died.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, that's
yeah, and he just couldn't do it.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
And
it's a hard thing, and that's one of the things I've accepted. Being in recovery is not everyone makes it, and that sounds terrible, but it is true. And I will say that since I've been in recovery and been going to meetings, I've also gone to a lot of funerals. Because a lot of people I've met along the way haven't made it. And, it's a terrible, terrible, sad thing for them. It's a tragedy. For me, it's also a wake-up call, that this is serious. And I can't ever get complacent about it because the same thing could happen to me.
So, John, you must be pretty grateful.
I am so grateful. My life is so different than it was, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. I now have a job that I love. I had a long career, but it was doing stuff I didn't really care about. Now I do what I love. And I have people in my life that I love. I have a family of choice now, all of whom, for the most part, are in recovery. And it's given me a purpose that I didn't have before. And, I can't, exaggerate how important that is wanting to get up every day and go out and, I hope, help somebody. That's new for me.
Your second career, or maybe your third.
Second career, I hope it's my last career because it's been a great one for me. It's not anything I ever saw myself doing or knew that I could do. And for me, it's still a learning experience. Every day I learn something new.
Well, you must feel good about yourself and proud that you're able to help other people on a regular basis.
I do, because that, wasn't a part of my makeup before. I was, more about what's in it for me, and my outlook has just changed.
So I was interviewing Rabbi Manish Friedman, certainly one of arguably YouTube's #1 Orthodox rabbis. And he wrote a book called The Joy of Intimacy. Very good book. And so I was interviewing him. And it was my honor to do it. And I said, Rabbi, I was holding my wife's hand the other day, and I felt this moment of intimacy. How can I get more of that? And he says, remember, Michael, it's all about her. So I went about my merry way for a year. And then I said, I had this epiphany. I said, I had it backwards. It's not about me. It's not what I can get. It's really what I can give to the relationship and give to her. And that's opened my mind as far as in life. Not just what I can get out of it, right? But this bigger picture.
It is. Giving back is, the thing that actually all those gifts come back to me, but I have to give them away to receive them.
So we have about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
But before we wrap up, what I'd like you to do is look in which camera do we have? The second one? Or that's whatever. Why don't you look in the camera right over there?
Okay.
And I'd like you to think about some people that have helped you along your way. They could be a mentor, maybe they're a friend, somebody that's helped you, and that they may be alive or not. But if you want to mention them by name, that would be great.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. I think most of the folks that have helped me the most in life are the ones who have set me on the path I'm on today. And so I'd like to thank Douglas, and I'd like to thank Robert and Rob and all the folks I've really met in the last couple of years, because my life today is the life I want to live.
Wonderful.
And it's been in recovery. So
wonderful. Let's look in this camera right up here. Folks, thanks for joining us. Remember, if you need some help, you can go to the Miami Project. They're all over the internet. You can ask for John and be able to help you. And my brother Grant and I subscribe to the Disney rule, which is when you hug someone, don't stop until they do. Have a great day. Bye.